product design, supply chain, and distribution efficiency. Here's the case that talks about parent war fights over two of the biggest global industry. This case also one of the interesting topic and legal fight in the modern business. In 2011, Apple first sued Samsung for copying the design for the iPhone. Apple initially sought to block Samsung phone from the market. Years by years, the technology has been longer outdated, and the fight has thrown in a lot of money, but it didn't give a good result. In 2018, Apple and Samsung settled a 7 years legal fight over smartphone parents. Apple won on paper, however, it failed its goal to gain a competitive advantage over Samsung and other phone makers in the market. So let's talk about Samsung Wear I/O. Both Apple and Samsung come with different competitive strategy. One of the biggest difference is the operating system. Android is now of the world's most commonly used smartphone platform and is used by many different phone manufacturers. Apparently, the outcome for the Android system is sustained competitive advantage. iOS is only used on Apple devices such as iPhone, MacBook, but at the same time, Apple also have its advantage with the unique feature and all-right reserve. Jump to the comparison of earphones. AirPods and Galaxy Buds show maximum benefit to their own user with wireless feature and similar prices. However, just like what it shows, it is not rare in the market when Samsung only released Galaxy Buds in 2019 after Apple started to introduce AirPods in 2016. So it fell into competitive party section. When we talk about the challenge for Apple, one of the challenges that Apple facing with their competitors is the proportion of the global market share. Looking back to the first 3 quarters of the market share in 2019, Apple has failed to gain any ground. As the latest quarterly analysis shows that Samsung and Huawei increased their smartphone shipment, while iPhone sales was dropped compared to other major firms in the market. In fact, Apple is stabilizing in China due to the price adjustment and the trade-ins, but other majors such as India and Europe remain challenging for the expensive iPhone, and it is always substitute mobile brand that available in the market. Apple tries to maintain their share with the new and different strategies. That's also one of the reasons that Apple dropped the price for the new release iPhone 11 series compared to the price of iPhone 10 in order to bring back their market share and boost the sales in the future. So here's the introduce of the Samsung Wear I/O. I'm here to pass the speech to Rebecca. She's gonna talk about the how Apple pursue and grow. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. We've identified 3 key places that we feel Apple can continue to pursue growth: wearables, services, and emerging markets. Now, if you take a look at some of the information about the wearables market, you can see that it's intended for fitness purposes, and that the industry is expected to be up over $15 billion in 2020, which is a 5.8% growth year over year. Additionally, the number of users is up over 350 million, which is 1.8% higher than this time in 2019. Now, Apple uses the term wearables as kind of an all-catch category. This includes things like Apple Watches, AirPods, and Beats. And even just in the last year, it's grown 37% for Apple, and it includes 10% of Apple's revenue. So you can see that this is already a big part of Apple's revenue gain. And we believe that Apple can continue to capitalize on this by partnering with healthcare and insurance people. So by working with an insurance company, Apple can get their watches in front of people in order so that the insurance consumers can get a lower insurance rate based on their fitness, which is connected to their watch. A lot of companies already are kind of looking into doing this. So if Apple's able to partner with certain insurance companies, then they'll definitely be able to continue to grow their wearables market that way. The next is services. So Apple services currently include iTunes, Apple Care, and Apple Pay, amongst other things. And back in August of 2019, they launched the Apple Credit Card. They've seen steadily increasing profits since 2013, but we really believe that by launching this credit card, they'll be able to continue to grow their services because they'll have to develop customer service to go along with the card, as well as kind of increasing the amount of people who are using Apple Pay and the Apple Card to pay for things. So right now, not every place accepts Apple Pay, which is all through your phone. And so by allowing consumers to get an Apple credit card, it increases the amount of transactions that consumers will use through Apple. And then lastly, emerging markets. So 46% of the iPhone unit volume comes from emerging economies. And Apple is kind of struggling in some of these emerging economies because their currency tends to depreciate against the US dollar. And on average, it's about 15% lower than the US dollar. So we really think that Apple can kind of get into these emerging markets because it's very obvious that they want the iPhone and they want the different Apple products, but they can release maybe a different model that's a little bit cheaper, or even just adjust the prices in these emerging economies to make it more affordable for the people who live there in order to get everyone using Apple products and kind of getting the iPhone in the hands of the consumers who really want them. Now I'm going to pass it on to Sammy, who's going to talk about Nokia and why they struggled long-term to compete.
So I just wanted to start off with some background of Nokia. So in 2006, Nokia was known as one of the most innovative companies in the world. They were selling billions of phones, they had really strong control of the supply chains, and they had really tight relationships with the carriers. So in 2007, Apple released the iPhone. This is really when Apple's stock started to increase, and only a year later, they released the iPhone 3G. So 2 years later, Apple was able to jump to second place behind Nokia in the market share in the smartphone market. And in 2012, Nokia's market share already fell to below 10%, and they lost just about $95 billion in 6 years in market capitalization. 2 years later, Microsoft bought Nokia to further their own presence in the smartphone market. So there were three main areas where Nokia failed to be effective and maintain longevity in the smartphone market. First and foremost, the inability for Nokia to use the resources they had and capture value from them was a major misstep. Their operating system was called Symbian, and it wasn't as advanced as other operating systems on the market like iOS and Android, mainly because it couldn't be used with touchscreen smartphones. But nevertheless, they continued to invest in it, and they also actually refused to implement Android operating system when Google offered them the ability to use it. So by the time that they did make a touchscreen operating system, they were way far behind, and they were just playing catch up at that point. Next, there was their failure to see opportunities around them and then react to the competitors. Nokia was actually the first company to create an internet-based smartphone, but they created it on premature market analysis, and they focused mainly on the IT aspects of the phone instead of what the consumers wanted, which was a home user device like Apple created. So they ignored threats from their competitors, especially when it comes to Apple. So when Apple was coming out with the iPhone that had phone capabilities, internet, camera, music, with its own app store to draw developers in, they didn't really do anything to help themselves. They just continued and went their own way, which brings us into the final point in which they had no flexibility in their organizational structure and their strategy. Since they were an industry leader, they got into the mindset of their way being the best way to do things, which obviously was not true. And then management was also extremely slow at making decisions, which allowed them to lose their vision. So Nokia was known as the easier to use phone, and the first phone after the iPhone came out was very difficult to use and very confusing to use. And in addition to not following their vision anymore, they also started to focus on different products that didn't include smartphones. So that definitely let them lose traction. So in all of these areas where Nokia failed, Apple was able to succeed. Apple was able to use their resources and capture value. Steve Jobs created a culture that drew in smart, like-minded individuals who wanted to be innovative, and this allowed them to create technology-based products that had a customer orientation. In addition, it also allowed them to create this product ecosystem where the products were able to flow into each other, like how the iPhone has the App Store and can be used with the AirPods. In addition, Apple also sensed new opportunities and reacted to their environment around them. They built their products based on being different than anything else on the market, and not only that, but they were responding to what their competitors were doing. When Samsung released the Galaxy S3, Apple was already coming out with the iPhone 5, and when Spotify started gaining traction and attention, Apple Music was already being developed. Finally, Apple has been able to stay capable of change. They are flexible enough to move into new industries. For example, the Apple TV Plus application on iPhones has gained them entry into the streaming services industry, as well as Apple Pay with the Apple credit card and the wallet application. Not only are they moving into new industries, but they're also able to move into new markets. So the low-cost smartphone market has allowed them to create the iPhone SE, which is going to come out with a new version this year, but it allows them to stay capable of staying in that market. And then finally, the incremental innovations that Apple does when they send up updates to the iOS, the iPhone, and the cameras, and continuing to make them better. If Apple wants to continue to succeed like they have in the past, Tim Cook faces a lot of challenges. To start, Apple has to stay releasing innovative products. They've had the short-term competitive advantage because of their super different products they've introduced to the market, but they need a long-term advantage. They can do this by continuing to make differentiated products and getting into new markets and industries.
The second one, the culture change from Jobs to Cook. Apple, led by Jobs, is more open and unruly. This corporate culture has given Apple more loyal employees. But Cook is a very traditional CEO. When they meet some problem, he often brings together senior management and reaches consensus, rather than letting them debate and then make decisions. This change has made Apple lose many Apple core people.
You will never lose your customer with a great community service. Build up great customer service and community of Apple. Know the audience. Marketing on products. Stay with the core competencies are the best strategy to maintain the market share with the top competitors.
So as I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges that Tim Cook is going to face is emerging markets. And one way he can address this is by adjusting the cost of the iPhone to address depreciation concerns. So by addressing these concerns, he'll be able to get the iPhone in front of more people.
And finally, one of the challenges that Tim Cook faces, like I mentioned earlier, in the external threats is possibly some government policies within the technology industry. In conclusion, Apple has an internal dependence on high-end, devout consumer bases, a strength and a weakness, and externally, geographical areas of opportunity may also bring along political challenges, opportunities, and threats.
For the second question, we can find that most of Apple's products are similar in terms of competitive advantage. However, Apple's strong innovation capability and high brand loyalty among the Apple users allow Apple to occupy a large market share in this industry.
Both Apple and Samsung company have different market strategies and operating systems. In particular, Apple stands for its unique products as a competitive advantage.
Apple is also able to pursue growth through wearables, services, and emerging markets.
So Nokia was inflexible in their technology, their organizational structure, and their strategy, as well as their ability to be proactive and reactive to their environment. All of these areas Apple was able to succeed in and be very flexible and strong.
Lastly, Tim Cook is challenged with releasing innovative products, dealing with culture changes, kind of fitting in emerging markets, and dealing with government policies. We thank you all so much for your time and paying attention to this video. We will happily accept any questions you guys may have for us. Thank you.